The question on the floor in our series, which is called The Eternal Perspective, is how do you put life together so that it works? So when it comes to living life, God chose a person who would be the best qualified to teach us about it. Not only did he choose the best person, he chose the person who I am going to talk about today to write a whole book in the Bible about your life and mine, coming from his life, and his life is the illustration. So there's one whole book in the Bible written about your life and how to live it and how not to live it. 12 full chapters written about that one subject. The man's name is Solomon. The book God gave him to write was Ecclesiastes. If anyone is qualified to tell you about life, it's Solomon. I mean, here is a man who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He was the son of a king. And yet, when he opens up his book, in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, the first 3 verses says, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What advantage does man have in all his work which he does under the sun? Solomon opens up his book and he tells you when he opens the book, I don't have anything to talk about. The word vanity means emptiness, worthlessness, that which is without purpose. He opens up his book talking about his emptiness. If any man shouldn't have been empty, should have been Solomon. He had everything you and I dream for, long for, and go after. And yet his first words is vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. All of life is vanity. Emptiness, purposelessness. And that's why we spend so much time trying to find something to turn us on, to light our fire, to give us a sense of worth, significance, and well-being. But wouldn't you know it? Soon as you look like you found it, you lose it. It's like when you score a touchdown in life, something crosses the goal line and you feel like, yeah. Looks like soon as that happens, somebody blows a whistle and calls the playback. So purposelessness is what Solomon wants to talk to you and me about. You know, people spend so much time trying to fake it to make it in order to at least give the impression I know who I am and what I'm doing. Life becomes meaningless and without purpose when it gets disconnected from God and eternity. The whole 12 chapters of the book of Ecclesiastes is about life under the sun. Under the sun means on earth, in time and space, where men live, work, play, raise families. That's life under the sun, where humanity operates. He says when your life under the sun gets disconnected from life above the sun, when your life, my life, our lives gets disconnected from God and an eternal perspective, you can expect to be able to say, as he says, vanity of vanity, saith the preacher. All is vanity. He takes us on a tour of his life. He gives us a sampling of how he tried to fill the hole that he was feeling deep down in his soul. A hole so big you could drive a Mack truck through it. Yet he wanted to get it filled. And so in chapter 2, he says, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure. He said, I'm a party. He said, I said to myself, let me test you, life. Let me find out what life is all about with a party. I mean, everybody likes a party. Everybody likes a jam. Everybody likes to be able to have a good time. He says, let me just have a good time. And so if I can have a good time, then I can feel alive. What did you do to have a good time? Because he says in verse 1, so go ahead and enjoy yourself. He says in verse 3, I explored with my mind how to stimulate my body. I wanted my body to feel something. I wanted to feel something. And so he says, I drank wine till I couldn't handle it anymore. I tested pleasure that would turn my body on so that I would feel this sense of life and purpose. He says, I sought pleasure. Notice his words. He says in verse 4, I enlarged works and I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself. Verse 5, I made gardens and parks for myself. Verse 6, I made ponds of water for myself. Verse 8, I collected for myself silver and gold and treasures of kings and provinces. I provided for myself male and female singers and the pleasures of men and many concubines. I was a player. He said, and I did all this for myself because I wanted to feel it. And so I spared no expense. How did the pleasure work out for you, Solomon? How did the party work? How did the good times roll? He said, verse 11, I considered my activities which my hands had done and the labor which I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity and striving after the wind, and there was no profit underneath the sun. He said, after the party, emptiness set in again. He says, it was vexing to me, and it was vanity. Not because it wasn't fun. It just had no meaning attached to it. No purpose attached to it. He's talking about emptiness of life underneath the sun. That is, disconnected from God. So he tried something else. He said, I know what I'll do. I'll get me an edumacation. Verse 12, so I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what will the man do who will come after the king except what has already been done? And I saw that wisdom exceeds folly as light excels darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I know one fate will befall them both. Then I said to myself, as is the fate of the fool, it will also befall me. Why was I then more wise? This also is vanity. All right, so let's look at what Solomon's saying. Solomon's saying he's the wisest man that ever lived, the Bible says. Nobody was more brilliant in knowledge, understanding, and wisdom than Solomon. So we'll just liken that to education, because he knew stuff. It's better to go to school and not go to school. It's better to know than to not know. It's better to be wise than to be a fool. He says that's better. But then he says, one day I was looking out the window, and I'm looking out the window, and I watched the fool walk by. This is the kindergarten dropout. The kindergarten dropout walked by. The fool, the guy who didn't know, the guy who had no understanding, the guy who didn't make anything of himself. I watched the fool walk by. And he said, when I watched the fool walk by, the uneducated guy, he says, I could see I was better off because I had some information, I had some knowledge, and I had some will. I was better than the fool, but then I got depressed. Well, what depressed you, Solomon? He says, one fate shall befall us all. My education won't keep me from the grave. My degrees won't keep me from the grave. In fact, the fact of the matter is the kindergarten dropout may live longer than me with the degree. He says death is the great equalizer between the fool and the wise man. So he could not find meaning in education because it wasn't going to keep him alive any longer. He said, let me try something else. Let me try something else. The party didn't do it. The education didn't do it. But money, 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 money. He says, but verse 18, then I hated all the fruit of my labor, for which I had labored under the sun, for I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool, yet he will have control over the fruit of my labor. The fruit of my labor, that's your money and stuff money can buy. Okay? That's the stuff you can accumulate with money. Fruit of your labor, the productivity of your life. He said, I looked at all I accomplished. He's a mega billionaire. He says, and I'm going to leave it to the one who should come after me. And who knows whether the one who comes after me is going to value it like I valued it. That leads us to probably the most famous chapter in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3. There's a time for this, and there's a time for that, and there's a time for this, and there's a time for that. Time to live, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck, a time to laugh, a time to cry. He goes through this in the first half of chapter 3. There's a time, a time, a time, a time, a time, a time. What is he saying? He's saying, I got bad news for you. You live, I live, we live in a closed universe. Because soon as you find out there's something to laugh about, something else is going to happen to make you cry. Soon as you find some peace, something else is going to break up to turn it into war. You are locked into a closed universe and there is no escape. That's why people are looking for ways to escape, because they're trying to break out of this closed universe. Because they feel stuck and stymied in things they cannot control that makes life hold them hostage in a way that they do not want to be jailed. God, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Verse 9 of chapter 3, what profit is there to the worker from that which he toils? I have seen the task which God has given the sons of men with which to occupy themselves. God, why do you have me trapped in this thing called life when all I've got to look forward to is death? He helps us in verse 11. He has made everything appropriate in its time. He has also set eternity in their heart. Yet so that men will not find out the work which God has done from the beginning even to the end. I know that there is nothing better for them to rejoice and do good in one's lifetime. Moreover, that every man who eats and drinks sees good in all of his labor. It is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will remain forever. That there is nothing to add to it, and there is nothing to take from it, for God has so worked that men should fear him. God has boxed you and me in to time and space and made it so we can't break out of it to force us to him. He has set eternity in your heart. Now, you may not know it, but that longing for fulfillment, God said, is a longing for him. That longing for purpose is a longing for him. So he has set within time and space an empty spot that we try to fill with cheap substitutes in order to find meaning that can only be discovered in him, and he did it on purpose. He set eternity in your heart so that deep down where you live with you, unless you cover it over with fake stuff, there is this hole that only he can fill. So he wants life underneath the sun to get connected with life above the sun. He wants your human life to be connected with God and eternity. And to the degree that you connect eternity to time is to the degree you change vanity into victory. But as long as you disconnect it, you're trapped in something you cannot change. You are not living in the land of the living on your way to the land of the dying. You are living in the land of the dying on your way to the land of the living. So if you think this is it, you're going to live like this is it. If you know this is not it, then you will live as though it's not it, and you will find life in that approach. God doesn't mind you having fun as long as it doesn't exclude him. He doesn't mind you. He says to enjoy life. It is a gift of God. Don't misread that. He says life is a gift of God. Let me tell you what it doesn't say. Life is God. Life is a gift from God. It's never to become God. So the moment you make life a God instead of a gift from God, you make your life an idol that competes with God. So many people live their lives as though your life is God, and God will never respect idolatry, even if the idol is yourself. Myself. Life without God is like a needle without a thread and a pen without ink. He says, enjoy life, just don't disconnect it from me. All that's legitimate to enjoy. 1 Timothy 6 says God has given you all things to enjoy. If God has given it and God's not excluded for it, God says enjoy it. Maximize it. Don't disconnect it. And so he closes with the last chapter of the book, chapter 12. And for those of you under 40, I want you to pay close attention to this, you teenagers here under 40, because 40 was the generational switch in the Bible. Once you hit 40, you are now in the next generation, which means a bunch of y'all are going downhill. Okay? If you're over 40, you're heading south. Okay? He says in chapter 12, the book of Ecclesiastes, verse 1, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near when you will say, I have no delight in them. A lot of people want to give themselves to God when there's nothing left to give. They want to read the Bible when they can't see. They want to hear a sermon when they can't hear. They want to serve God when they can't get out of bed. Because he spends the chapter talking about body parts wearing out. He talks about eyes going dim and ears that can't hear and legs that can't walk and arms that can't grab. Now you old and you want to give yourself to God. He says, remember your Creator when you still have eyes and ears and legs and tongue and mind and strength. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Parents, remind your children and your grandchildren to remember their Creator when they have the capacity to do something that matters for eternity. Why? Because of the last two verses. The conclusion, verse 13, when all has been heard, is to fear God, keep his commandments, because this applies to every person. The Hebrew means this applies to all of you. For God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. Because you're going to have to meet God one day. You're going, whether you want to or not, it ain't over when it's over. You're going to have to meet God. I'm going to have to meet God. So since we got to meet him and we don't have a choice, and he offers us purpose if we meet him now and not just wait to meet him then, and enjoy the good things that he's given us along the way, he says you can have victory and not vanity. They tell you at Yellowstone Park, don't feed the bears. You go to Yellowstone Park, there's a sign that says don't feed the bears, because you will give the bears junk. They're going to lose their ability to eat from the natural habitat that they are living in every day, because they keep looking for the junk, the sweets. They keep looking for the cotton candy. They keep looking for the peanuts. They keep looking for the touristy stuff. So when the tourists are gone, they don't know how to live in their natural habitat. So don't feed the bears. Look, don't let the world out there feed you and trick you so that you no longer can live as God wants you to live. You can't get rid of the tourists. They're all going to show up, but you can decide what you're going to eat and what you're not going to eat. Reggie Jackson had a nickname, a famous baseball player. His nickname was Mr. October. Everybody knew him as Mr. October, because in October, the boy would show off. I remember sitting there at a World Series and watched him hit 4 home runs in one game. I was watching 4 home runs in one game. Mr. October showed out. A news reporter came to him after the game and said, "Why, Reggie Jackson, are you so good in October?" Reggie Jackson said, "Simple. Because I begin in the preseason in February to play with October in mind. So even though I'm in February, my mind is on October. And because I never lose sight of October, I can play well in February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, and I'm really ready to show up in October because I begin with October in mind." So as you leave today, leave with eternity in mind, and you'll do well in January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October.